One quiet morning in Japan, the 8th of July in 1853, four strange ships entered Edo Bay, anchoring off Uraga, moving through the water without any trace of oars or sails. People in Uraga scrambled to safety. This new type of ship, called a steamship, was utterly unknown and alien to the citizens of Japan, the country into which the squadron was entering.
In the 1850s, the United States sought to establish trade with Japan. Using debate, diplomacy, and some brute force, Commodore Matthew Perry forced Japan to sign a formal treaty with America against popular opinion and ancient laws that had permitted Japanese trade with only China and the Netherlands.
Commodore Matthew Calverth Perry commanded the fleet that steamed into Edo Bay on the 8th of July, 1853. Having extensive diplomatic experience, he was tasked by President Millard Fillmore with giving a letter to the Emperor of Japan. Perry was prepared to use whatever diplomacy needed to complete a successful mission for the United States that had long been a goal for Fillmore. Ironically, Perry had risen to his rank after the previous Commodore, Johnny Chowlick, had been removed from the position due to fighting with a Brazilian diplomat.
The American fleet was met by the Japanese with slight hostility, as ancient laws of Japan prohibited any people from countries other than China and the Netherlands to enter the country or to trade with them. Historically, Japanese leaders during the 1600s were less nationalistic, but the following leaders supported the closed society of Japan in response to the insurrection that had been incited by Jesuit missionaries and consequently created laws forbidding most foreign trade. Japanese diplomacy during this period focused on laws that banned foreign trade and contact with any country or people that were strictly religious.
Thus, the minor officials who were in control of Uraga redirected Commodore Perry and his crews to sail on to Nagasaki, which was one of the few ports that were approved for American contacts since Nagasaki had higher officials in residence. Commodore Perry's method of negotiation and diplomacy was to intentionally display power after calculating its effect. Therefore, he refused to see Japanese officers of lower ranks, but insisted on only meeting with the highest-ranking officers. On the day after Perry's arrival, Nakajima Saburusuke, a Yoriki, or a police officer, requested to see Commodore Perry but was flatly rejected. After some intentional delay, Perry consented to allow Saburusuke to meet with an American officer of equal rank in the hopes that this diplomatic action would be beneficial to the goals set forth by the United States government.
Lieutenant Conti, the man chosen by Perry, spoke in Dutch with Saburusuke, prioritizing the goals of the discussion, beginning with Commodore Perry's opposition to the guardboats flanking the squadron. If they were not moved by order of the Japanese, Conti stated, they would be moved by use of force. There would be no debate. This effective tactic resulted in the removal of all but a few remaining boats that were then forced away after a boat from the American squadron presented arms. The Japanese responded with a warning from the office of the governor of Uraga, advising all Japanese citizens and military to avoid American ships.
The same day, Commodore Perry ordered boats to take a survey of the bay. Kayama Aizuman, backed by Japanese officers, informed them that it was against Japanese law to do so. Perry stated that American laws commanded this action and ordered the American ships to fire guns at the water 2 or 3 feet in front of the boat. Perry ordered the Mississippi to move farther into the bay towards Edo. Using his own methods of diplomacy, called gunboat diplomacy, Perry intimidated the Japanese by showing power.
On the 10th of July, Aizuman came to see Perry on a diplomatic mission, yet was refused under the rules established by Perry, but was allowed diplomatic access to Commanders Adams and Buchanan as well as Lieutenant Conti, as Perry mistakenly thought Aizuman was a higher rank than Saburusuke. A conference was held among these men, with the Japanese receiving very little specific information in response to their diplomatic inquiries. The Japanese officials again insisted that the squadron be moved to Nagasaki, a request that was refused by Perry, stating that he purposely came to Uraga due to its proximity to Edo, the location of the shogunate of Japan and the center of governmental power, which Perry sought to access as part of this diplomatic mission.
He also stated that the Japanese government had been informed of their arrival in the Bay of Edo 1 year prior, in 1852, and threatened the Japanese further. If the Americans were not allowed to deliver the documents from the president to the Japanese government close to Uraga, a force sufficient to deliver the documents to Edo would land intact, no matter the consequences. Commodore Perry made it clear that any vacillation would also result in an American attack. He was determined to achieve the goals of the United States.
Debating this threat, the Japanese attitude slightly altered and made a counter-proposal. An official appointed by the emperor specifically for this purpose would receive the documents on shore next to the bay, but the answer to Fillmore's proposition would be conveyed to Nagasaki through the Dutch or Chinese diplomatic officials there.
Perry rejected this request. He would not go to Nagasaki to receive a Japanese reply. Providing no option for debate, he said that President Fillmore's letter must be received and replied to, or the consequences of insulting the United States would be Japan's fault. Once again, the Japanese yielded. The letter was accepted and an official receipt was given at the head of the Bay of Edo.
President Fillmore's letter asked the Emperor of Japan to agree to the following diplomatic measures. 1. Abrogate the ancient laws forbidding foreign trade. 2. Command kind treatment of shipwrecked foreign sailors. And 3. Allow American ships entrance to specific ports to engage in the purchase of provisions and fuel.
The Japanese response was mixed, leading to much debate. Widespread fear followed the Americans landing near Edo, the most powerful city in Japan at the time. In Edo Castle, debate surrounded the letter's content. For one, the Japanese did not want to receive a letter forced upon them, unclear of the power of even this small force of 4 ships. Who should they send to receive the letter? Nobody knew. Neither the shogun nor the emperor could go. Ultimately, the governing group did not want to accept the terms in the letter, yet realizing that war could destroy Japan, they accepted.
Diplomacy began in earnest with the gift exchange, including firearms, books, perfumery, intoxicants, and multiple volumes of Audubon Birds of America and quadrupeds. The Japanese were able to satisfy their curiosity about how the steamships worked once they were permitted to board.
On the 17th of July, Commodore Perry sailed back to America, indicating he would return for the answer of the Empire of Japan. He returned 7 months later with 10 ships and more gifts. The Japanese conveyed their reply to the president's letter to Commodore Perry, diplomatically stating that although the laws of their ancient ancestors strictly forbid change, to remain attached to ancient laws seems misunderstanding of the age.
In the 7 months since Perry's first visit, the Emperor of Japan had died and a new emperor had ascended the throne. The new emperor promised to the lords and lesser princes that he would comply with the ancestral laws preventing any changes. Japanese leaders requested that the Dutch Superintendent of Trade inform the government of the United States of America of these events and provide written confirmation.
On February 13, 1854, Commodore Perry was given permission to land. Diplomatic actions quickly resumed with the exchange of gifts and treaty negotiation.
Diplomatic actions led by Perry resulted in a new treaty between Japan and the United States. 1. There shall be permanent peace. 2. 2 ports will be approved for American contact, namely Samoda and Hakodate, and if any American ship is wrecked on the coast of Japan, the Japanese will assist them. Shipwrecked crews must be freer than the Dutch and Chinese. If any goods are wanted, there shall be careful deliberation between the parties involved. 3. It is agreed that the U.S. can trade silver, gold, and articles of goods for other articles of goods. Ship supplies shall only be obtained by the Japanese officials that control them. The treaty is concluded by promises by both nations and some other formalities.
By opening Japan, the United States effectively invited the involvement of other countries, quickly drafting many treaties. These diplomatic actions effectively forced open Japan, breaking the 2 centuries' worth of isolation and opening trade relations. 10 days later, the shogun died, leading to a reformation of the governmental system of Japan, placing the emperor in power and redacting isolationist laws. There can be little debate of the long-term effects of Commodore Perry's mission on American and Japanese societies. There is free trade between the United States and Japan. Things traded from Japan to America include various mechanical objects, vehicles, optical and medical instruments, and more. Things traded from America to Japan include mineral fuels, aircraft, electric machinery, and more. When there is no state of emergency, such as the coronavirus pandemic, Americans can visit Japan with minimal restrictions.